Hi, welcome to Lone Star Legal Aid's Facebook Live event on Friday, August 27th. My name is Amy Den, and I'm the managing attorney of the environmental justice team at Lone Star Legal Aid. I'm here today with Chase Porter and Jessica Villalon, attorneys from Lone Star Legal Aid, Colin Cox, an attorney at the Environmental Integrity Project, and John Beard Jr., the president and founder of Port Arthur Community Action Network. Our topic today will focus on a recent complaint filed on behalf of Port Arthur Community Action Network with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The administrative complaint is a civil rights claim made under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that asserts that the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, or our TCQ, which is known as our state EPA, has failed to properly regulate a facility in Port Arthur known as Oxbow Calcining LLC in a way that has disparate impacts on the residents of West Port Arthur. Oxbow puts out more sulfur dioxide than any other facility in Jefferson County. Today, our attorneys are going to tell you a little bit more about the health impacts that sulfur dioxide has on the residents of Port Arthur. And Mr. Beard, who lives in Port Arthur, will be able to tell you what it's like to live there when Oxbow is operating. The pictures you're seeing on the screen are pictures that Mr. Beard took of the facility while it was operating. Through our civil rights complaint, we are hopeful that the US EPA will investigate the regulatory process that TCEQ has undertaken and make Oxbow put in pollution controls called scrubbers to reduce the amount of sulfur dioxide that Oxbow is putting out into the environment. We hope you enjoy this discussion of these environmental injustice concerns. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica. Thank you.
So looking at the demographics of the community of West Port Arthur, we notice a high concentration of Black residents near the Oxbow facility. This is especially staggering in light of the fact that the number of Black residents decreases as you move further and further away from the facility. For those 13 census tracts surrounding the Oxbow facility with a Black population of 81% or higher, 91.54% of those total residents are Black. And this ratio does not reflect the demographics of the city of Port Arthur, Jefferson County, nor the state of Texas, all of which have a Black population of 38.2%, 34.1%, and 12.9% respectively. What these numbers show is the history of racism and segregation in the city of Port Arthur, particularly school segregation, and this is reflected in the fact that schools with a higher Black population are disproportionately closer to the Oxbow facility than are schools with a smaller population of Black students. Of the 6 schools located the nearest to Oxbow, all of which are disproportionately Black, each is situated less than 4.5 miles away from the facility, with most of them being just less than 3 miles away from the Oxbow facility. So from these statistics, it's clear that the Black population is disproportionately affected by Oxbow's operations.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. I'm Chase. I'm just going to kind of talk about the health aspects of this. As Amy touched on, Oxbow gives off huge amounts of a gas called sulfur dioxide. It actually gives off almost 90% of all the sulfur dioxide that's emitted in Jefferson County, which is, it's mind-blowing if you know the area because there is so much industry there. It's amazing that one facility could be responsible for that much of the sulfur dioxide. And as Jessica said, near Oxbow is the community of West Port Arthur, which is a largely Black community, and that's why this is so concerning. Sulfur dioxide has a number of health effects with it, and Oxbow is there in this community giving off huge amounts of that gas. Specifically, sulfur dioxide tends to irritate our breathing. It can cause wheezing, it can cause coughing, and a number of other breathing problems. If you have asthma, sulfur dioxide tends to make asthma worse. It can lead to more asthma attacks. It can cause asthma as well. If you're exposed to it long enough, people tend to develop asthma. And if you have other underlying respiratory diseases, exposure to sulfur dioxide over time can exacerbate those diseases, make them worse, and lead to a number of very severe health problems. And as we know, the people of West Port Arthur experience that every day. Another thing that is so concerning about sulfur dioxide is that it helps form another air pollutant called particulate matter. Particulate matter are very tiny little particles that float in the air. Some of them are big enough for us to see. You can think about like soot or dust in the air, but a lot of particulate matter is so tiny that we can't even see it. And what's worse is that the very small particulate matter is causes the most health problems in humans. We breathe this in, we may not even realize it's in the air. It can lodge itself in our lungs, it can get into our bloodstream. And from there, it can cause all sorts of breathing problems. It can cause heart attacks, it can cause strokes if it gets into our bloodstream and circulates around our body. And we know from data that's been collected for the Port Arthur area that the people in that area tend to have very high rates of asthma, for example. The CDC looked at 18 metro areas in Texas, and Jefferson County, where Port Arthur is, has the 17th highest prevalence of asthma. And that is assuredly all the industry there is both causing asthma to develop, but also making asthma worse. Jefferson County has high rates of strokes and heart attacks, and a number of other health issues that are associated with the pollutants that Oxbow is putting out into the air. With that, though, I want to turn it over to John Beard. John, you have to live this every day. We can talk about the data, but this is really about all the individuals in West Port Arthur that you work with as the head of Pecan and yourself and your family. So could you just kind of spend a few minutes talking about what it's like to live in that community, how you've seen Oxbow affect yourself and your family and your coworkers and friends, and just why you thought it was so important that Pecan stood up and filed this complaint with the EPA and try to get something done from this.
Sure. Thank you, Chase. Good morning, everyone out there in Facebook land. John Beard here, the founder, chairman, CEO, chief bottle washer, and head cook for Pecan, Port Arthur Community Action Network. If you're not familiar with the Port Arthur area, west side of Port Arthur in particular, that is the closest in terms of proximity to this source of emissions from Oxbow calcinizing, we're virtually surrounded by sources of emissions. But Oxbow is especially egregious because of the great amount and number of sources that it has, or the amount of release that it has. They release over 11,000 tons of sulfur dioxide, sulfur trioxide, nitrous oxide compounds yearly. Those pictures you see show what we see in the air every day, 365 days a year. I was out with a reporter, or really a photographer yesterday, who was meeting with some of the people that have been previously given, I guess you'd say, reports of testimony, and talked to a reporter about that previously. The photographer happened to take pictures of it. And one of the places we went to, the person that was there talked about, seeing these emissions on a daily basis. And what it's like living here is to live in a perpetual state of some type of sickness or illness, whether it's a cold that goes away only to come right back, or whether it's throat irritation, whether it's eye or irritation, or even skin irritation. It's being in a constant state of having some type of pain, mostly respiratory, associated with it. And what is so bad about that is that the respiratory issue creates issues with your heart, as well as your lungs. Because if your heart is not able to oxygenate properly and oxygenate your body properly, then it begins to feel effects, that strain of not being able to be properly oxygenated. And also the high incidence of cancer here is directly tied, I believe, to that. Port Arthur is twice the state and national average for certain forms of cancer, heart, lung, and kidney disease. We have members of Pecan's organization who have numerous family members who have either died from or gone under treatment for cancer. We have a lot of people here also who are on breathing treatment children that are breathing nebulizers and having to take breathing treatments daily, and senior citizens who can't even go out in their yards or enjoy their gardens or enjoy just basically general living in their retirement years without being tied to oxygen or without having to take breathing treatments several times a day. So that's what it's like living here. You're living in an area that's basically been sacrificed so these companies can have profits and do the things that they do. And it's affecting people. And we believe that it was important to file this action because the rights of those people to breathe clean air and to not be disproportionately affected is of utmost priority to us to protect the lives and health of people. So now I'm going to turn it over to Colin Cox to talk more about the legal aspect of this and in terms of why we're doing. But we're doing this not to hurt these companies, but to get these companies to be better in terms of the way they regulate their emissions so that we can live safer, healthier lives here in the west side of Port Arthur in general, and also all of Southeast Texas. Colin?
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, John, for that. So by filing this Title VI complaint, we're asking EPA to do a number of things. Primarily, we're asking them to investigate whether TCEQ has violated the civil rights of the residents of Port Arthur by approving the renewal of Oxbow's operating permit last year. We're asking EPA to investigate the disparate impacts of TCEQ's failure to regulate Oxbow and consider the race and socioeconomic status of the people being exposed to Oxbow's pollution. We're asking EPA to investigate whether Oxbow is manipulating its operations to circumvent TCEQ's pollution monitors. We're asking TCEQ to issue permits that meet the standards of the Clean Air Act, and we're asking for monitoring to ensure that Oxbow is following those permits. Most importantly, we're asking for pollution reduction or for pollution controls to reduce Oxbow sulfur pollution by 95%. Technology to do that has been in existence and use for decades, and we're asking for that here. TCEQ has allowed Oxbow to pollute even after Oxbow has violated air quality standards for sulfur. And TCEQ has allowed Oxbow to pollute even though every major refinery in Jefferson County has been forced to reduce their sulfur pollution in the last few years or decades. The residents of West Port Arthur have been breathing Oxbow's pollution for 85 years, and 85 years is too long. We're asking EPA to do something about this. Kick back to Amy.
Sure. I'm seeing in the comments in the chat that we have on Facebook Live that people are responding that they have had health impacts like the ones that Chase mentioned, John mentioned. Just know that we are trying to get the regulatory agencies to do something about this particular facility to curb the impacts that it has from releasing so many harmful pollutants into the community. We are going to continue these efforts. The civil rights complaint sometimes can take some time, but we're hopeful that given the extreme situation that we have with Oxbow being such a large emitter of sulfur dioxide in particular, as well as one of the few facilities nationally that does not have any pollution control at all. A simple adjustment to the way they operate would not mean that they need to shut down, but they could just operate like everyone else does with these scrubbers that help reduce pollution. So again, we're not trying to stop the facility from operating. What we're trying to do is get them to operate in a more environmentally friendly way that in this time of environmental injustice as well as climate justice recognition is more important than ever for coastal communities like Port Arthur. John, is there anything else you would like to share with the group, either about Pecan or other initiatives that y'all are working on around Oxbow or other facilities?
Sure, be glad to. Essentially, Pecan's an organization that deals with environmental justice, community and social justice issues, and community development. The concerns that people have, we try to amplify those voices. And getting more back to the situation we have with Oxbow in our filing, we've done this in large part because, as Jessica said earlier, the large number of minority and Black people that we have here are also economically disadvantaged. Over 2/3 of them are economically disadvantaged. The Port Arthur community has a rate of poverty that's in close to 30%. And those people do not have the means or resources to be able to go after these companies that are violating and polluting and doing what they do. So I'm very thankful for the cooperative work that we're doing along with Lone Star Legal to try to address these things, because without that legal representation and the force of law behind us, we can't do anything about these companies. We can't make our lives better. And it's crucially important because, as one of the statements that we're reading in the chat says, that they're killing us. Essentially, that's what they've done for 85 years. And the population here has declined sharply over those 85 years. At one time, there were over 10,000 people living in a basically 10 block by 10 square block area. Now it's probably less than 4,000 people here in a period of 40 years that has been in a decline. So those things have to be taken in consideration. The effect on the lives of people, the effects we see with so many people needing respiratory aid, health, and treatment. Those things are important, and they point to the fact that people have been undergoing this type of exposure and suffering for a number of years. These effects are chronic over time. And so one of the things also I want to mention to you, that in pursuing this from a Title VI angle, some of the research work that's done by Lone Star and myself turned up that TCEQ is also under a consent decree for previous violations by another suit that was filed against them. So we're using the force and power of the federal government, the EPA, which oversees all of this, to get TCEQ to do its job, to do the things they should do to protect the lives and health of Texans and especially people here in Port Arthur. We're using Title VI as a means of going about it because everyone has a right to clean air. And Title VI covers that, as well as other possible environmental laws or either executive order actions such as Executive Order 12898. And that exactly speaks to the fact of people who are economically disadvantaged having to be protected by the laws that are on the books. And in this case, we're not being protected. EPA is not doing it. TCEQ is not doing it. So we're asking them to look into this. And once they do, based on the evidence that Lone Star has put together, and based on the anecdotal evidence and the talks that we've had throughout this community. And by the way, Amy, we've got to get back and take the videos that we talked of those voices and visit with those people and let them tell their stories so that we can make this even more graphic and more detailed to them. Because once they see the effect on the community, they will be compelled to have to act. TCEQ will have to act, and EPA most definitely will have to act to see to it that they do right by this community. And that's pretty much what we're here to do. Pecan's obligation and job, and mine as a member of this community, is to try to make it better and improve the lives of people that have been so long neglected and so long have not had someone to champion their cause and amplify their voices.
Thank you, John. I think Chase wanted to share a new tool that Lone Star Legal Aid has developed for reporting nuisances.
Sure. Thanks for all of that, John. So I noticed in the comments that someone had commented that, they know facilities there are releasing chemicals and pollutants into the air. And it's very important that Pecan, that Lone Star Legal Aid, that TCEQ, we all know what's going on. And when you see something out in Port Arthur or wherever you live that doesn't look quite right, it's important that that's reported so that we can take a look at it and make sure that if there's a problem, it's addressed. Part of how we got here with Oxbow is that we had people such as John and his friends and colleagues telling us what's going on in Port Arthur. And so in order to make that easier, Lone Star Legal Aid worked with some great law students to develop the Environmental Nuisance Reporter. And I think we've shared that link in the comments on Facebook. If you see something, something smells wrong, something looks wrong, something sounds wrong, go to our Environmental Nuisance Reporter. It's a really quick and easy form. You can fill it out and it will come to Lone Star Legal Aid. and it will go to the TCEQ. And that will let us all know what's going on in your community, and give us and TCEQ a chance to come in and take a look at what was going on and figure out if there's something that can be done to prevent that from happening again.
Thanks, Chase. And I want to thank all of those that tuned in today to listen to this very important information around the Oxbow facility. It looks like we are getting another question from David Jones. Does the current pandemic amplify the effect of refinery pollution? Colin, I'm going to throw this one to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. That's a great question, David. There's research, there's tons of scientists and research happening around COVID right now, of course. And there's already been research published quite recently, that people who are exposed to a lot of particulate matter, and that's, so people that are exposed to a lot of particulate matter or live in a place with, excuse me, high particulate levels are more susceptible to problems from COVID, more susceptible to respiratory problems, more likely to be hospitalized, more likely to have to use some kind of breathing treatments or ventilators. And so that's a very real thing. And our understanding is kind of only just beginning, but we do already have published science that particulate matter specifically, exposure to that makes people more vulnerable to COVID. There's not as much on some of the other pollutants, but the sulfur dioxide that we're talking about coming from Oxbow does form particulate matter in the atmosphere. So I think that's relevant here. That's relevant to the people in Port Arthur. So that's a good question.
Yeah, excellent. And I think John just wanted to respond to one of the questions that Port Arthur Community Action Network represents all of the communities. We're particularly focused for the purposes of this complaint on the West Port Arthur community because it is so close in proximity to the Oxbow facility. However, Pecan has been working on issues across Jefferson County, working on issues related to Motiva, Valero, other facilities in the area. And John, I don't know if you want to make a pitch for Pecan membership or events that coming on, or people want to leave information on how to connect with you. I know you've got an environmental justice Facebook group where you share a lot of information about this type that you may want to talk about so people can connect with you.
Sure, Amy. There are a number of ways you can get in touch with our organization. On social media, on Facebook, we have, as Amy said, the Environmental Justice page. We also have Pecan's own Facebook page, and Pecan also has not one, but two web pages. Port Arthur, pecanportarthur.org and pa-can.com. So we're located in those areas and all of that. And plus, you can also reach us by email at pecanportarthur@gmail.com. And you can reach Pecan also through yours truly, John Beard, on social media and otherwise. But as Amy said, we try to deal with a number of issues that affect the community here, but also larger issues on not just the state, but on the national level. We're trying to bring attention to the concerns and problems here. One of the issues that was brought up was about all of Port Arthur being affected, and you're right. But those fence line communities are right there, in some cases, across the street or even next to the fence. And there's an old saying that when these refineries have a hiccup, that we get, a cold or flu or pneumonia, that we're directly affected by it. And that's just not the west side, but that's also communities along 19th Street and out in El Vista and Vista Village. They're right across the highway from it. And they receive the brunt of it. We represent and work with all of those peoples in all of those communities. So if you have a complaint or a concern, as was said earlier, if you smell something or hear something or see something, say something. You can get in touch with us through Lone Star Legal Aid's Environmental Nuisance Reporter, or you can get in touch with TCEQ here locally by dialing 409-838-38-898-3838, or you can get in touch through the Neighborhood Witness Program with Environment Texas. So there are a number of ways that you can bring your complaints, and these complaints are confidential. You don't have to worry about somebody pointing you out and saying that you're complaining and doing all of these things, but they will send someone out and check to see how things are going and what's happening and take readings even. And we're going to even try to do some that work ourselves. Just a matter of recently, we distributed over 400, close to 400 indoor air monitors for the home to not only detect any contamination that you may have in your home from the outside emissions, but also mold and volatile organic compounds and other compounds. And these were part of a grant that we received, and we give these to the community free of charge. So if you'd like one of those monitors, get in touch with us. We'll make one available to you. We have quite a few left, and we've got several more distributions of those monitors to do. But we also want to look at setting up a community monitoring network. And that's something that we're in the course of working on as I speak right now. So we're here to help you and help the community and try to address a number of community related issues. And not all of them are environmental. They're about the quality of life, and they're about the way things affect you and go on here. But we're here to help make a difference and to work with you and to represent those things. So the best thing I can tell you to do is stay tuned, stay in touch, keep working with us. And as you work with us, we'll work with you to make Port Arthur a better place for all of us, because Port Arthur can be better.
Great. I think we might have time for maybe one more question. If anybody wants to put a question in the chat, we'll try to answer it as if we can. We have a request for a monitor, an air monitor from David Jones. Okay.
I know Mr. Jones. He knows
Okay.
where I live. He can come and get a monitor anytime he wants to. Thank you,
Okay.
David. Appreciate you being on. Appreciate that.
Great, great. Well, I'm glad we're able to hook you up, David. That's wonderful. All right. Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate your time and attention today. We will try to keep you all informed as the complaint works its way through the administrative process. These are not typically quick processes, but we're hopeful that this administration and the current EPA will be very in touch with what's going on and the injustices that we've outlined in the complaint, and hopefully for the benefit of the people of West Port Arthur and Jefferson County as a whole, will take action soon. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great Friday and even better weekend. Take care.